So we're at an auspicious moment here at the Buddhist Temple, believe it or not, yet another one, filled with auspiciousness, But this particular auspiciousness has to do with, this is the eve of the beginning of a journey that several of our community members are about to undertake, wherein they study to receive the precepts. And the precepts have everything to do with studying, becoming intimate with, and realizing, actualizing how an awakened Buddha actually functions in the world. So it's a big deal. It's not something that's required at any point. Many practitioners will engage in Dharma practice for years, decades, or their entire life and not feel a resonance with the precepts. But for those who do, it's a turning. It can be one of those moments of evolutionary shift. And so, as we are about to leap into this, a koan came to mind that is a particularly apt one. And of course, it's resonant for the whole community as well. I'd like to share it. Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit. This is a case called Hakujo and the Fox. It's from a collection called The Gateless Gate. The story goes like this. Whenever Master Hakujo gave a teisho on Zen, gave a talk, an old man sat with the monks to listen and always withdrew when they did. One day, however, he remained behind, and the master asked, "Who are you, standing here before me?" The old man replied, "I am not a human being. In the past, in the time of Kasho Buddha, I was head of this very monastery. Once a monk asked me, 'Does an enlightened person also fall into causation?' I replied, 'They do not.' Because of this answer, I was made to live life as a fox for 500 lives. Now, I beg you, please say the turning words on my behalf and release me from the fox body." The old man then asked Hakujo, "Does an enlightened practitioner also fall into causation or not?" The master said, "He does not ignore causation." Hearing this, the old man was at once enlightened. Making a bow to Hakujo, he said, "I have now been released from the fox body, which will be found behind the mountain. I dare to make a request of the master. Please bury it as you would a deceased monastic." The master had the Ino strike the gavel and announced to the monks that there would be a funeral for a deceased monk after the midday meal. The monks were wondering, saying, "We are all in good health. There is no sick monk in the hall. What is this all about?" After the meal, the master led the monks to a rock behind the mountain, poked out a dead fox with his staff, and cremated it. In the evening, the master ascended the rostrum in the hall and told the monks the whole story. Obaku thereupon asked, "The old man failed to give the correct turning words and was made to live as a fox for 500 lives, you say. If, however, his answer had not been incorrect each time, what would have happened then?" The master said, "Come closer to me, and I'll tell you." Obaku then stepped forward to Hakujo and slapped him. The master laughed aloud, clapping his hands, and said, "I thought a foreigner's beard is red, but I see that it is a foreigner with a red beard." Now Muman has some commentary on this. He says, not falling into causation. Why was he turned into a fox? Not ignoring causation. Why was he released from the body of a fox? If you have an eye to see through this, then you will know that the former head of the monastery did enjoy his 500 happy and blessed lives as a fox. And finally, we have Mumon's poem. Not falling, not ignoring. Odd and even are on one die. Not ignoring, not falling. Hundreds and thousands of regrets. Now this case is something that a Zen student will approach after having done some considerable amount of koan work. In some lines you wait to do this for a little while because there's quite a lot to it. For our purposes here, though, we can use this to catalyze some conversation, some discussion. You should be clear that there's a difference between talking about koans and having a conversation and getting some interesting and useful distinctions and actually working with the koan in your Zen practice itself. That said, let's venture into the waters a little bit. This is one of these koans that you step through the looking glass with, right? And there's some of these in the stories, in the literature, where clearly you're in a mythic kind of realm. It's a dreamscape. It's once upon a time kind of stuff. See, and what we have here is a monastery and an abbot who's giving talks, and there's an old, if not elderly, community member who's just kind of there. And then every time the talks are done, he's gone. There but not. But there. No interaction, but a presence. And then one day, everyone else is gone. And that elderly old man is still there. And so the abbot says, "Hey, who are you?" You know, having some measure of the force, he can sense that there's something different about this one. And the guy says, "I'm not immortal. I'm not a human being." Oh? That's interesting. As it happens to be, in one of the ancient ages, you know, they mentioned the Buddha, which was it? One of the ancient Kasho Buddha, one of the historical ancient Buddhas. These are mythological figures that represent, you know, the Buddhas before Buddha, on and into the infinity. And there are future Buddhas. There's one waiting in the wings to show up any minute. So there's this continuum, you know. And so he's saying, in a past age, I was on that very high seat that you just gave your talk on. The guy says, "Well, what happened?" Well, once I was asked by one of my disciples, one of my monastics, a practitioner in the community, does a fully awakened person still fall subject to the law of cause and effect or not? Now, the background to this is worth filling out just a little bit, because in the Indian culture, within which Buddhism evolved, much like Christianity evolved in a Jewish culture, right? There was this karma thing, right? And karma says that, in that way of talking about it, there is this constant wheel of reincarnation and rebirth. And in contrast to most Westerners who hear that as a cool thing, in the East, that's not a cool thing. Because what it means is you're trapped. It's like you're jacked in the matrix and you can't unplug. And you're going to go through cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle, helplessly pulled around by these forces. So the idea is to unjack. So, I mean, that's a good modern story that gives you something of the feel of karma. It's always funny to me when I hear baby booming Westerners talk about how great it is to be reincarnated and all that. Oh, well, okay. But for our purposes, this monk is saying, he's asking this very basic question. If you become awakened to Satori, are you still subject to that constant reincarnation stuff? Are you still subject to cause and effect? There's a way that we would maybe say it more readily. The other view of karma is simply that it's cause and effect. And you can see this everywhere. There is nothing that you can point to or think of that isn't the effect of some cause, which itself is not also a cause for some other effect. It's this loop, you know, and it just keeps going, the dominoes falling. So what is it to be free within that? Is it really true that an awakened being is free from cause and effect? Now to this, the abbot gave the classic Buddhist textbook answer. You know, like 101 stuff. Sure, of course. Duh. And here, the planet turns on a different axis for a minute. And the old man, the old being says, because I gave that answer, I was turned to a fox for 500 lives. Now the other thing that needs a little bit of unpacking here is a fox is something like a witch's familiar. It's like a black cat in that culture, or maybe you know, it's a rat, or it's a big cockroach. It's not a good thing. We tend to actually have nice associations with foxes. They tend to play nice characters in our Disney movies and stuff. But over there, this was not a nice creature. This is a nasty creature, right? This is vile. It's not something you would aspire to. 500 lives as a cockroach. But more properly, actually, is the black cat, because you see, a black cat represents evil, mischievous, bad luck, way uncool, right? And so this guy asks him, he says, well, can you speak a turning word for me? Abba, speak a word for me. You see, this is very important. And in a lot of ways, this is at the belly of the tradition. The fact is, when we are ripe, when our mind is in the right concentrated place, when we've settled down, when we've got our ground underneath us, when we've got our belly together and our heart is open and our mind is there, we're filling our space, something actually can change. And in fact does. And a lot of times there's these catalyzing moments of encounter. And they're always direct. It's very personal, this thing, this awakening business. And in another sense, it's completely impersonal. But it's always belly to belly. And so he asked, can you help me? And the teacher, being a teacher, said yes. And so the monk, this ghost creature, asked him the same question that was asked him 500 lifetimes ago. Does a fully awakened being fall into law of causation or not? And this time the response comes back. A fully awakened being does not evade cause and effect. Does not evade. Now with that, upon hearing these words, and really being able to hear these words, our ghost character has a turning and is released from the body of the fox. And that sort of closes Act 1. You know, and there's a lot in there. The curtain comes up again, and we see the monk saying, I dare to ask the master a favor. On the other side of this mountain, behind that big rock, is my fox body. Would you give it the funeral of a priest, of a practitioner of the Dharma? And of course, the teacher, being a teacher, said yes. And I can kind of see something like this actually happening where, I don't know, Hakujo had this really great idea. The monks are a little bit stagnant. The soup is a little bit old. The pot needs a bit of stirring. And I think maybe this part we come out of the looking glass and come into something more historical, maybe. I can see something like this happening. Zen teachers do this kind of stuff sometimes. He rings the bell. Eno, ring the bell. Ring, ring, ring. The monks gather. What's up? Prepare for a funeral. No one's ill. Everything's cool. What's going on with this? Silence. Follow me. And with great gravitas they proceed. And all the monks are going, oh, what's going on? What's going on? And they go around and they're traipsing around and they come around. And I can just see Hakujo. He's got his staff. He's making his way. And this is really shifting everybody. He's taking them through the looking glass a little bit. And he comes around to this place, and lo and behold, there's this rock. He takes his staff and he pokes in there, and there's a fox body. And all the monks go, ew! Bad karma, bad voodoo, no, get back. And he's like, no, this is the priest we're burying. Prepare for our most holy ritual. You see? So the monks, to their astonishment, take this black cat, this fox, and prepare a cremation with full ceremony. I stirred the pot. What does it mean? Nice, holy, wonderful practitioner of the Dharma, evil fox. Are they the same or not? Interesting. One must simply bow to this teacher's skill. How simple to say. Now, y'all don't judge. What does it mean to actually catalyze some experience that'll actually stick, make some kind of difference, has the possibility of shifting? See, it's one of the interesting things when you really get into your Zen practice, when you really meditate, when you really start to let your mind reorient itself physically, physiologically, soul, heart, everything starts to align. Then you can do things that to someone for whom that has not occurred yet seem just flatly crazy. Just a great example. But if your wisdom eye is open, you see what's going on here is the dance of the Buddhas. And it's your dance. It's my dance. It's our dance. These koan are not just some exotic collection of parables from millennia ago or something. This is actually talking about a dance that goes on in your soul, so to speak. In your own heart, in your own body, in your own practice. Those of you who are considering this Jukai initiation, those of you who have been accepted as initiates, you should be very concerned with this. this cause and effect stuff. You say, what does that really mean? Even in this confusing, bizarre circumstance. You know, everybody here's been around the block enough to know these simple black and white, always this, never that things. They don't cut it. Obviously, it doesn't cut it. So what does? What's the truth of how an awakened being navigates good and evil? Up and down, yes and no. Priest and fox. Self and other. So they come back. They make their ceremony. He sends them away. And leaves them all to think about it. And then the next day, or later that evening, after some gestational period has occurred, 40 days later, the perfect amount of time later, right? He gets up and explains the bit about the ghost. And then he asked a question. Obaku asked the question. Well, Obaku, you have to understand, is a very awakened being. One of the clues is when you're in these koans and it says a monk asked, it's like some guy wondered, But if you get the guy's name, if you get the practitioner's name, Obaku said, and not 10 times out of 10 to be sure, but pretty good clue if we've got that name recorded that there's something going on there. It's just a little cheers note for those who might be working on these. Obaku thereupon asked, the old man failed to give the correct turning words and was therefore made to live these 500 lives as a fox. Tell me, teacher, what would have happened if he had given the correct answer every time? That's a great question. It's a beautiful question. Because see, the obvious premise is because he made a mistake in the first answer, he was punished with this evil lives as a fox. So what if he never made the mistake? What if he was correct every time in his answer? What then? And of course the teacher, being a teacher, said, come close and I'll tell you. See, here we have a couple of dragons chasing each other through the sky playfully, joyfully in fact. So he smacked them. And that's Obaku, the one who asked the question. Obaku asks, if the guy never made a mistake, what then? The teacher says, come here and I'll tell you. And then Obaku comes close but gives him a smack. Now, mind you, it's not a, it's a symbolic, I wasn't there, but it's a symbolic, gesture, more likely than not. I mean, some of these guys, I don't know. But never hit me, I'll never hit you. Deal. I was working with a student the last time I was doing interviews, and the guy's trained for a long time in a lineage that's kind of Klingon, and so he goes, ah! and I just about peed myself. What? Don't do that. I'm going to hand him a dry cleaning bill. The deal is, don't just scream at me, and I'm not going to smack you with a stick or nothing, all right? We'll get that out of the way, just for future reference, just to say it. So anyway, I'm sure this was a nice gesture of, because he puts him on the hook, says, come close and I'll tell you, and he comes close, and before he can, the smack comes. And this is not random. As my first teacher used to say, this is not gobbledygook. These guys are not just randomly doing some crazy thing because they're high. This is actually really clear presentation of the reality. It really is. In koan study, you learn to express truth rather than just to describe it all the time. It's a very different thing. You present it. You don't just describe it. See? So, the master then laughed aloud, clapped his hands. Right? Obviously, he wasn't upset about being hit. He laughed, spontaneous laugh. See, right there, it's very interesting, isn't it? The invitation, the response, the turn, surprise, changing of roles, host and guest changing, teacher-student changing, and everywhere along the circumstance, everywhere with those cause and effects, here we see two dragons at peace, able to dance. I'm yang, you're yin. Oh, you're yin, I'm yang. Fine. You see? Whatever the circumstances are, there is a way to be at peace in them. Whatever the conditions of cause and effect are hurling your way, as long as you stay outside of that in your experience, then you're in a fight. When you become cause and effect itself, then you're at peace. You're completely in your element. Favorable circumstance, fine. Unfavorable circumstance, fine. Even you're keeping it together, fine. You're freaking out, fine. What is that fine? The master laughs aloud. He claps his hands. He says, "Ha! I thought the foreigner's beard is red, but I see that it's a foreigner with a red beard." The foreigner thing is talking about Bodhidharma. This is the ancestor who brought the teachings up from India into China. And he was famous for having a red beard. Who's red?
You better watch out, I'll cut your eyelids out.
Too late. So anyway, yeah, that's like that at our house. So he said, "I thought the foreigner had a red beard, but I see it's a red-bearded barbarian." So you have priest and you have fox, you have hakujo, you have obaku, you have you and your circumstance. Now in the commentary, there's a very interesting line. You know, he puts a couple of hooks out for you to kind of chew on. Not falling into causation. Why was he turned into a fox? The apparently correct answer was apparently calamitous result. Not ignoring causation. Why was he released? Is that really the cause and the effect? Or not? If you have an eye to see through this, then you will know for yourself, I might add, that the former head of the monastery enjoyed his 500 happy lives as a fox. And there, this old worthy is being very grandmotherly, very nurturing, very, look here, just eat. It's on the spoon, it's in your mouth, just eat, take. And we have the poem. Not falling, not ignoring, odd and even are on one die. Like a dice, you throw dice. Odd and even are on one die. Not ignoring, fallen. Again, those are the two responses we've heard. Hundreds, thousands of mistakes. Ceaseless mistakes. Endless mistakes. Thank goodness.